We have, as I was saying, we have a really good group of speakers tonight to talk about waste, and we have I think some good questions for them. So I'm going to jump in. We have Jessica Aldridge, who's the sustainability manager with Athens Services, and she can maybe give us a little bit more background about what they do. We have Eric Newton, who is with Clements Environmental, and he can his job, as far as I understand it, is to help us learn about this stuff. So he gets to do that tonight. And then we have Robert Potter, who's with LA Sanitation and the Environment, who is if I understand, a solid resources manager who's been doing this for a long time and can tell us what the scoop is. And then we're hoping to have Alessandro Negrete from East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice to help bring that perspective, which has been, I think, frequently a missing perspective in this conversation. Okay, so my first question for you folks, and anybody, this is going to be informal, so just chime in if you want to talk about this, is why does it matter? Why are we caring about where our garbage goes and what we can recycle? Who cares?
Well, there's no way. So we are living with all the waste we produce. It's all around us and it's out of control. And add to that, everybody.
No, I mean, I would add that, you know, there's a lot of elements to it, right? There's the resource upfront side of it, and then there's the end game of it, how it affects the environment. So, I mean, it does matter how we treat waste or how we eliminate waste, because it's going to be the end of our society if we don't. I mean, it's the end of the world if you don't take care of your waste properly, right? And if you don't get your greenhouse gases down, if you don't reuse the products, because you'll run out of natural resources, you know, trees and everything else. So it's a big issue.
I'd like to add to that as well. And I once Alessandro is on the call, it would be great for them to pipe in on this as well. But one of the issues when we talk about waste, especially in the environmental community, and I think this is being handled a bit differently here lately. I think the sexiness of it might be starry-eyed for some people, but when we talk about waste and when we talk about zero waste, it's not just the product that we have downstream. It's not just the stuff that's like, well, I only have this cup and I only have this box and I only have this whatever it is, and how do I dispose of it? Hopefully I can recycle it. If I can, where does it go? How does that affect it? Waste is circular in its process. It is holistic in its process. It is from the time that we extract a resource and what the effect of that resource extraction is to the communities from which we take it and the people living from within those communities, to the time we transport it, to the time we manufacture it, to the time we ship it, to the time we put it on our shelves, to the time that we pick it up, we use it, and we dispose of it. There is a footprint within that whole entire model. And that is what is meant by zero waste. And that is why we have to take a concerted effort in understanding our product, what happens to them, where they go, but also what they're made out of and how they are, and their complete life cycle footprint on our communities. And I think East Yard communities can speak to that further, and I don't want to speak for them. So that's another thing that we need to take into consideration, because when we're fighting for other environmental regulations that are being put forth in front of us at the local and state level, there is always going to be a connection to the waste that we are creating as well, and how we are extracting it and disposing of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that really strikes me, because I don't, and I think I speak for most of us, I don't tend to think about where my products come from, and I don't do enough thinking about where they go. And I think this is what hoping a revolution, you know, revolution is maybe too strong a word, but we really need a culture shift, it seems, in terms of how we think about this. And I forgot to mention, but I should mention, I do want this to be informal. So if you want to join in the conversation, just raise your hand, and I think Lorraine can help me manage this, but we can try to manage the chat, or you can just raise your hand if you want to say something. And Rosalind is already raising her hand. So Rosalind, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in that it's also an equity issue. And I think that a lot of the people who are most affected by high levels of waste in their communities, or by high usage of products that generate a lot of waste, tend to, like, there's inequity in the impacts on that, and there's socioeconomic inequities, and it's a health related issue because the health impacts at every stage, from the generation of resources to the end stages of use and entering the environment, will most affect people in an inequitable way. And then finally, it's an economic inequity issue in terms of accountability, and there's so much emphasis on individual responsibility, but then there's a lack of accountability for the very wealthy companies that have created business models around not only generating waste, but pushing a culture of waste.
Yeah, that's fun. Can somebody, I'm sure either Eric or Jessica or Robert can talk to the, tell the story about the commercial, which made me very teary in my youth, I'll be honest, about the American Indian with the tear rolling down his cheek. Can one of you guys talk to that, please?
I don't mind jumping in. I just was talking about that last week at another webinar. So the Plastics Keep America Beautiful, which was a front organization for the plastics industry, when the kind of environmental awakening in the 60s happened, they realized that they had a problem because people were noticing how bad all this disposable products were, and the disposable kind of lifestyle they were pushing. So their solution was to tell us that we were at fault for littering, and that littering was really the problem. And littering is against the spirit of America, and particularly the spirit of Native Americans, who were portrayed and as having a deeper connection to the land than most American citizens. And they showed an American Indian male seeing scenes of factories, of pollution in water, of people throwing trash out of their cars. And at the end, he turns to the camera with a tear. But it was such, not only was the message so insidious because it's blaming the public for these, kind of industrial pollution, this is what Jessica was talking about, the entire life cycle. But the actor was not even an actual Native American person, and someone who Hollywood had been making a career in Hollywood portraying. He's actually Italian. So just on all levels, the plastic industry has been gaslighting us about who's at fault for all the plastic pollution. And but the one good thing I think about that commercial is that it did inspire a lot of people to be more environmentally conscious. And if they dig deeper, I mean, it took me 30 years till I knew that that commercial was a total ruse. So.
Yeah, I just learned that kind of recently. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of things in the chat that people want the concrete information. And we will get there, and we will get there soon. Ida, if I'm saying your name properly, do you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Hi, yes. Sorry, I was just eating. Yeah, so I just wanted to point out, I think that there's a lot of great conversation here. And I think a really big thing is just the connection of capitalism and racism that's connected to waste. The fact that this whole production of things that we don't necessarily need that have been continuously produced, especially targeting women in terms of like households and all these other things. And then the fact that we, I say United States tends to, dump things that are banned inadvertently or get banned in the United States and other countries. And even, the fact that we're dumping or recycling into China rather than taking, responsibility for it. And I think that's a really huge problem right now, which is why I'm here on this webinar to find, solutions, because, everything's being incinerated now and not being recycled, and we don't have an efficient system. So I think that there's a big connection between the issues of capitalism and just racism and how people of color and people of the third world are disproportionately impacted, and the fact that there's a huge difference in culture as well in terms of how I remember Kamala Harris was doing like a cooking video when she was running for office, and she was like drying her hand with a paper towel. And I just wrote in a comment like, why don't you use a regular towel? And everybody was like jumping on me. And I was just like, how is this ingrained in you that you think that this is a preferential thing, when if you go to any other country in the world, no one is gonna be that way. It's so expensive. And it's funny how this cost also is getting ingrained in us, of how it's like so expensive to live because we need so many things, clothing and this and that. And so I think that like somebody pointed out, the culture, the mind shift, all these things, anti-brainwashing, maybe a reverse Clockwork Orange would be great. So I'm looking forward to, I'm also running for Los Feliz Neighborhood Council. I just wanted to throw it into District C. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you, Ida. Raduca.
Yes, so totally piggybacking on Ida. Yes, out of control consumerism, but I feel on my end about like we need to reach children and families and basically educate at a level where they grow up already with this as a, and when I say this, there are so many elements of this that I'm not going to address all of them, but certainly there are fires at our doors, at least in California, and kids, and as a therapist, we see huge rise in anxiety about climate change, yet, and to be honest, some of these issues are already so huge, possibly so out of control that on my end, how do we keep hope for the newer generation and inform them in a way that's not just, oh, in school, let's do a bit of recycling here and there, but become more a way of living and sort of help family understand that actually there are certain changes they can implement that can be actually easy, and or creating a community that cares about this kind of thing. I don't know, I'm not having all the solutions, but certainly we need to pull in the families and the children in this. Thank you.
Okay, you're getting a bit ahead of me because I do want us to talk about solutions, but I want us to, let me back up and mention something that Ida mentioned, which is China. So I'm hoping that one of our speakers can talk about what did happen with China, what were we doing before, and why it seems to me, why were we caught so flat-footed when they decided they didn't want our trash anymore? And maybe it's occurred to me, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe they should have done this to us a long, long, long time ago and held us accountable for our own garbage. So I'd love to hear your folks' thoughts on all of that.
And
Maybe
just
a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with the whole China issue.
And just to throw in really quickly to add to the China issue, I just worked on a policy paper with people in Africa, the American Chemistry Council. So it's chemical companies together with petroleum companies are now pushing for African nations who aren't part of plastic waste trade agreements to start accepting plastic waste from the US and to kind of turn other countries into a dumping ground. So it's gone from China to other countries.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rosalind. Go ahead. Eric,
I can jump in. I can jump in.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so and it's a 30-year history of recycling in about 5 minutes here. So
fair enough.
Recycling came into play 20, 30 years ago. Yellow bin program, set out your magazines, bottles and cans in the yellow bin. And there was an emerging market in California and a lot of places for fiber processing and plastics processing. During the transition from the 80s into the 90s and the trade imbalances with China, there was a great market for returning, and we never sent trash to China. That's illegal. The only thing we can send is what we call recyclables, which may have a percentage or a fraction of trash in it, but
Okay.
Trade agreements don't allow for you to export your trash to other countries. So you're moving your plastics, your papers, your mixed papers, your newspaper. Well, with the cost of trucking and moving of materials across the United States to get them to recycling plants, and especially for California, San Francisco, and everything on the coast, it became really economical to move your materials to China, because what was happening is China was sending 40,000 boats here to deliver materials every day, but we weren't shipping 40,000 boats back. So we could put all of our recycling and all our materials on those boats for free, pretty much. So now you just saved all the cost of hiring a trucking contractor, hauling it to Arizona having to offload it and putting it into it. Just went right on the boat and you forgot about it. You got a price. It was $37 per ton or $80 per ton. So it was a profit margin. And if you look at the history of recycling, especially in Los Angeles, the city, it was a profit making. Not profit, but it was bringing revenue to the city up until about 5 years ago. So a couple policies in China came out. First, it was the green fence. So the green fence was an effort to try to reduce contamination. So, most of your recycling loads, when they went across, the MRFs that sorted them weren't doing the greatest job of getting.
Robert, can you slow down and tell us what a MRF is, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Materials Recovery Facility. I'm using that trash jargon again. So a materials recovery facility, which is one of the places where we take our materials, they sort it into bales, and then they pack it into a truck to be shipped off. So back when the price of it was really valuable, they didn't have to do a great job because everybody wanted it, right? And it got to China and it may had 10% contamination, which that's where you had the trash component. That's where we were dumping our trash on other people because there was a fraction of contamination. When the green fence came in, China started enforcing rules that says, you know what, we're not going to take all your trash. If we're going to take your recyclables, we want it to be cleaner. And they started reducing what was allowed in a load as contamination. Shortly after that, and then a couple things happened in China. China's economy turned. They became a large producer. They had a big middle class. So they already started producing their own materials that they could recycle, right? They didn't need the world's materials because they had a booming economy that was creating its own plastic bottles and its own plastic waste, and they didn't need our plastic waste. So their next step was to cut that contamination rate from 1% to 2% down to 0.5%, which is really almost impossible for your average materials recovery facility to get to, because we don't do a single stream recycling. We do a mixed recycling. So it gets contaminated or it gets cross-contaminated. So it's really challenging. And then the latest thing that China did is in the last year or so was just basically shut the door. They said, we're not taking any more materials. And it created another challenge. But while this material was not being shipped overseas, and when it wasn't being shipped overseas, there was a lot of pulp facilities, a lot of paper facilities, all in California and all over the United States. When that market shifted and it was cheaper to go to China, everything closed, right? So we had 14 pulp facilities in California. We were down to maybe 1 or 2 now. There just isn't that market anymore. So what left us flat-footed was our errant dependency, I guess, on China. And then them turning around and saying, we've had enough. And that's what created that oh gosh moment, right? And that's where we're at today. Now we went from in 2015 making $6 million in revenue to our projection for 2021 is that it will cost us $20 million to recycle the recycling in LA. So it's gone from something that made money to something that's costing us, that's a 4 times switch almost right there, 4 times in cost. So.
All right, thank you. Jessica or Eric or Alessandro, if you're here, do you guys want to chime in?
Yeah, I can also chime in about the fact, just going off of what Robert said in regards to actually having localized recycling opportunities, be they in closer to the West Coast, or if they be, in Los Angeles per se, or outside of the LA area. What we need to understand also about our actual recycling infrastructure, not the MRFs, the materials recovery facilities, where we say it's going to the recycling facility. That's not a recycling facility. That's a sorting facility. That's why it's called a recovery facility. The fact that we have limited recycling options within this country because of what Robert was just talking about has created as Robert said, the issues where we're at this moment. A lot of people also believe that we can ship this material within the United States easily and cheaply. Why can't we just ship it to Wisconsin? Why can't we just ship it to the East Coast? The moment a product is being shipped and crosses the Mississippi River, it is usually financially not viable to be able to recycle that product at that moment, depending on the product, of course, but it usually needs to stay on relatively close to its immediate coast. And so we are, getting more recycling opportunities locally, more plastic number one recycling plants. Another thing is that there's this misnomer, and we'll get into it later, about what truly is and isn't recyclable. And people think that it goes in order of the numbers, and they think number one is the best and utmost fantastic piece of plastic. And I'm going to tell you right now, until a few years ago, the only thing that we truly were recycling number one plastic, really highly recycling it, maybe it was getting shipped off to Mexico in a mixed batch, but was bottles. The clamshells, the to-go containers, those were recycled on the East Coast, but the recycling plants on the West Coast, they weren't taking clamshells. And so, but that's happening. We're getting number 5 recycling plants on the West Coast here in Los Angeles County and surrounding areas. We're getting more opportunities, but in order to, what the National SOAR did after the green fence, what the National SOAR did was to really say we got to actually build out the recycling opportunities locally, and we have to have this infrastructure locally. We have to make sure that our our materials recovery facilities can actually sort properly for these materials. So they're actually implementing technology that can get at cleaner streams. So better number 5, you have to optically sort for number 5. You're not going to visually hand sort for number 5. So to be able to upgrade our materials recovery facilities, our separation opportunities, and then to also have the actual recycling abilities within the state and locally. And so the state of California has also been investing in grants. They have pieces of legislation that came out even years ago to offer tax incentives for those that are building recycling plants. And there's a lot more, but just a quick overview that we have to build out the infrastructure even further from where we have it in order to support the systems that we want to create. And those were not as strong as they should have been potentially, but they didn't have to be because we were able to ship them off. Sure.
Okay, so thank you, because that was a lovely segue into
Hi. Sorry, this is Alessandro. And
hi, Alessandro.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I thought this meeting was at 7:30 and I was not in line. Anyways, not to deviate from that. I just say I really appreciate everything that everyone said, but I want to ground us in this idea that in America, because of a lot of what's been said specifically about China, we're made to think that, America was doing this great job around recycling. And even what we're talking about now around infrastructure, around recycling, I want to shift us away from that and understand that recycling is also not the answer, and what we should be striving for is zero waste. Because what we're talking about is most plastics are also not recyclable. What we think about recycling stations are transfer stations, which are go-betweens between landfills, incinerators, and other places. And so when we're thinking about what we're doing as progressive or our intentional ideas is really just creating a step. And I understand that a lot of times, especially right now, when we're thinking about the larger picture and infrastructure of sustainability, is this idea of getting there. But if our goal is not zero waste, then we're missing the concept. Because a lot of especially when we're thinking of also bioplastics are also not the solution. There isn't a single answer towards what we have to, think about. It's really zero waste, the idea. And as neighborhood councils, those are some of the things that I think that we should think about, because the national sort policy that was talked about around the China, where we thought we were doing a great job, what we were doing is just shipping our things and we were causing greater damage to other countries. So I just wanted to ground us in this idea around we're not thinking about reuse, we're not thinking about recycling, but really focusing on introducing zero waste as the goal.
Thank you, Alessandro. And I should also mention that, Alessandro, if I remember correctly, you used to be on the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council, right?
Yes, I was on the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. I was able to reactivate the Transportation and Environment Committee, and I also work at East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, we're jumping around a little bit, but I do want to stay on recycling. I want to talk more about zero waste and longer term solutions. I also want to talk a little bit more about recycling. Jessica, you said something that I wanted to focus on for a minute, because I can tell you, as I would say I know more than your average person, but I am by no means an expert. I'm at the level where I have just heard a lot of conflicting messages. I've been told that things are accepted for recycling and then been told that they're actually not recycled. So I'd like us, if any of you, Alessandro or Robert or Jessica or Eric, can address that and help us understand what's happening to people like me who maybe know a little bit more than your average person. Why all the confusing messaging? Yeah, let's start there.
Is it okay if I just throw in a little thing? Also related to the previous topic or thread. The plastics industry also lied to us that most plastic was even recyclable at all. So that's part of the issue too, that, that was a brainwashing that we got, that, okay, recycling is going to be the answer. And 3 through 7 aren't recyclable, basically. And 1s and 2s, 5s are?
That's not
Anyway.
completely true.
Well, this is
Okay,
where
well,
it gets
in my
confusing.
class, I
So
have,
confusing.
that's what I heard, that and there's also a story that the recycling plastics industry trumped it up, how much plastic could be recycled. And anyway, it can only be recycled a couple of times anyway, so.
That's something I wanted to ask about as well, because, we think, oh, it's recyclable, but it's limited in its recyclability. Go ahead.
Can we talk about the definition of recyclable? I think that's where we need to start. So
Sure.
anything can be recycled. How about we start there? So I can say that this glass is going to be recycled. I can say the bioplast is going to be recycled maybe by some guy in Wisconsin in the back of his garage. But is that scalable? Is that economic? Is that feasible? Is that environmentally correct? How does that affect, we're talking about environmental and social justice issues, as I've said, again, when defining zero waste, as we did at the beginning of this. We have to take all those things into consideration. But pretty much everything can be recyclable. Doesn't mean that it can be recycled, doesn't mean that it's going to be recycled, doesn't mean that it should be recycled. And so that's first and foremost. When we're talking about what can be accepted in a MSW, municipal solid waste stream, which is what we collect in the city of Los Angeles from businesses or from residents, that stream and how we collect it, how we sort it, and what is considered recyclable in that stream is going to be different than if they're doing maybe a collection from, I saw Boeing on here, and maybe Boeing is manufacturing their own materials. They're able to participate in extended producer responsibility there, but to take their materials and put it back into their system and utilize it that way. Or they're able to say, maybe they're a grocery store and they're able to collect their film plastic. That's, your plastic bags, it's malleable, it's something that you can kind of push through. So they can say, okay, well, we can separate that material in a different container, source separated container only for plastic film. It can be picked up by a specific type of business. That business is going to take it from me and they're going to turn it into furniture. That could happen. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is right. I'm just saying this is how we can potentially recycle this material. If you're talking about what can come out of a MSW system and be recycled, if you have the most high-tech recycling facility or materials recovery facilities, and you have optical sorting so that you can actually use optics to be able to identify the product and shoot it off the line, you are truly going to be looking at, number one, bottles and clamshells, the to-go containers. You're going to be looking at pretty much all number 2s. You're going to be looking at number 5 polypropylene, which is going to be clamshells as well. It's going to be cups. It's going to be these, miscellaneous items. You're not going to be looking at PVC. That is the most toxic of all plastics. Number 4, you're probably not going to be looking at hard numbers 4s, potentially, depending on who you are, where it's going. But film is going to have a higher value. Number 6 depends on where you're going with it. City of Los Angeles for their residential collects some of the number 6 polystyrene or expanded polystyrene like foam. If it's expanded, if it's polystyrene and expanded, it's foam. There is hard number 6 plastics out there as well. And then maybe number 7. The flip side to all of this is that there's also chemical recycling. whether you agree in chemical with the concept of chemical recycling or not, whether you believe that it's environmentally and socially just, there's also chemical recycling. So your recycling company that you're working with or your city that you're working with may say, we take a mix of all different types of plastics. And the reason why they say they take 1 through 7 is it makes it easier on the consumer than telling you we take this type of 1, this type of 3, but not this type of 5 and not this. It makes it easier on the collection because they can then take it and decide what they're going to pull from the stream. And with chemical recycling, they're going to be able to take more product than they have previously in order to turn that into the chemical compound they need in order to turn it into the product that they want, which I'm sure that Robert can get into further. So, but if you're looking at something like Athens Services, who has one of the most high-tech materials recovery facilities in the nation, they're looking at number 1s, bottles, clamshells, number 2s, number 5s, and maybe when chemical recycling gets a little bit more mainstream, then maybe they're going to be taking a mix of different plastics as well. That does not mean they're taking everything in the stream. Number 7 is a mixed bag. Some of the number 7s can be considered toxic if they're the casings for electronics, if they're what they're considered as ABS, that may not be accepted in the chemical recycling. The number 3, the polyvinyl chloride, may not be accepted in the chemical recycling. Black plastic, that right now does not have a market. Maybe it'll be accepted in chemical recycling, but it doesn't have a market with other number 5. So even though we tell you number 5, put the number 5s in there, if it's a black plastic, it's going to be pulled out and it's going to be tossed. So and then that's the most high tech, right? Then you start moving down to the other recycling facilities or other waste hauling companies that may not have their own recycling facility or may have a recycling facility that's not that high tech, that may not have optical sorting, and they may not take number 5s because you cannot visually sort number 5s. You need optical sorters in order to do so because it reads the chemical signature of that product. It's hard. It's difficult across the board, and depending on the infrastructure you have, depends on what you are able to take. And LA Sanitation, I'd love to hear from Robert so we can expand on that, also uses a secondary MRF. So they run it through a MRF and then they take it to an additional secondary MRF where they get additional product out of it.
So I think my takeaway from that is I was raised Catholic. I tend to have a guilty conscience. I feel a little compulsive about doing the right thing. When I can recycle things, I feel like, oh, I feel good. I feel like I've done the right thing. I've put it in the bin. I'm good. I can sleep well tonight. And that's kind of like the hype we were talking about that all of us have mentioned. It's not true. It's just something that makes us feel better, but it's not true. Is that fair?
I think there's and we always call it what do we call it? Wish cycling, right?
Yes.
We hope for the best when we put it in the blue bin, right? We think, look, it looks like it should be recycled, or it appears like it should be recycled. So why would I throw it in the black bin when it could go in the blue bin and they'll figure it out? And that's where we run into some challenges, and trying to make sure that we maintain a good quality material and make sure that we're only putting in the things that we can. And styrofoam, there's a chemical process for styrofoam that returns it to its, to styrene, and then they use it to make jet fuel. I mean, if you're willing to spend the money that it takes to do it. And a lot of the plastics, and we're not talking about it here right now, but I'll throw it out there. There's a lot of plastics are subsidized by the consumer, right? You go buy a 12 pack of soda that's plastic, you pay 60 cents, right? So that makes the plastic more valuable because there's an incentive for the materials recovery facility to capture that material because they get a kickback from CalRecycle. Some of the money comes back to CalRecycle and then they share it with the city. So those plastics, your number 1s for sure, the value is not necessarily in the plastic, it's in the incentive, right? That producer responsibility or that consumer responsibility.
Okay, so thank you. So a couple of you have raised, and this is a question I had too. Cord mentioned it, and it's connected to what Alessandro said about the bioplastics. What are we as consumers supposed to do? Is there anything we can do in terms of, I know the main thing is we just really need to reduce. That's a really, really hard conversation. Let's ease into that by when we are buying things and when we're not reusing, are there things that we should be buying or shouldn't be buying? I mean, I'll just give this as my little example. Talk about guilt. This is Nulo, which my cat loves. If you guys have cats, you might know this. This is single-use plastic. It's terrible, and my cat is addicted to it, and I'm tortured. And I sent a mean, not mean, but a strong email to the Nulo company, and guess what they said back? Nothing. They didn't get back to me. So they're not very concerned about my worries, but I don't know what we as consumers can do and what we as neighborhood councils how we can counsel our stakeholders to do.
I'm just going to interject real quick and address something that I'm really appreciated of what you brought up, Lisa, because I think one of the things that we've been hearing is a lot about plastics. As for me, working at Eastridge, is also as a neighborhood council member, I've been exposed to some issues around where some things, because we throw it in a blue bin, we have this safety net or this like ignorance that it's going to be taken care of. But the reality is thinking about the incinerator, I don't know how many of you were aware, but there's an incinerator in Commerce, which is about 5 miles from Boyle Heights. And everyone, we have this idea that things that are in our communities will stay in our communities, but the trash and the recyclables that we thought were going from the community were being burned there, we're coming from Commerce. And so I want to invite us all into thinking about our own privilege and then doing the research, because where does the things that we put in the blue bin go to? A lot of these transfer stations, I want to move us away from calling them recycling stations to thinking about them as transfer stations, because that's what they are. They are transfer stations where they separate a lot of these things. And where are they? They're in communities of color. So I want to invite us also thinking about doing the research. Like, it doesn't really take much to Google the infrastructure of what we're talking about if we're going to talk about tangible solutions, because Boyle Heights, the neighborhood councils may be a form of government, but we have the voice of our electeds. And so thinking about solutions that will not impact our neighbor communities or the communities that are already at the forefront.
And so, and let me, Alessandro, I think, yeah, that's super, super important. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Can you say a little bit more about bioplastics? You touched on it earlier, and that is one of the things I wanted to get into a smidgen. Alessandro, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So a lot of folks have this idea that bioplastics are the solution, but bioplastics are a monoculture. They're called bioplastic because they're it requires a virgin compound, which means that they are continued, but they're continuously extracting fossil fuels. And this is where, for us as an organization, we're just like, fossil fuel extraction really impacts the communities that are at the forefront. So even bioplastics, which are called bioplastics because they have a form of a virgin chemical, it's not a real thing, because the impacts of it long-term are impacting communities of color, which is why we refer to a lot of these issues as environmental racism.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, I would like to add that too from the downstream practical, so that if, what scientifically happens to these products as well. And then in addition, I wanted to make one other comment to hear Alessandro's opinion on a comment that I made in the comment section. In addition to these bioplastics and single-use compostables, we're still creating waste. We're still extracting resource. We are still putting in the resources in order to be able to manage this material in the downstream. And then when this stuff comes to the downstream, we are told through a mechanism of greenwashing that this product is somehow more eco-friendly or more just in its makeup, and that somehow something magical is going to happen to it, just the way that we do with our waste cycling, that we're going to be able to compost this material. And we're not going to be able to compost bioplastics. Maybe in the future, maybe further down in the future, maybe they'll be accepted. But right now, just as from a scientific standing on these things, they at these high heat compost facilities, I know it says on there it can be taken by a high heat compost facility. Where are high heat compost facilities? Why can't we just send them to the high heat compost facilities? Because they don't want them. They will not take them. The material is certified to break down in 6 months. A high heat compost facility is usually breaking this material down in its first round in 3 months. And if it's a covered aerated static pile, it's breaking it down in 1 month. We have 30% of the material that's going to our landfill is organics waste. The second largest source of human-related greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California comes from the landfills of those organics digesting in the landfill. We need to get the organics out and into the compost facilities, which means we need to compost as much as possible and as quick as possible as we can at our compost facilities. We do not have enough compost facilities, will never have enough compost facilities to be able to compost all the organics that we have, including a bunch of bioplastic material that is coming into it. So first, we don't have the capacity to be able to break this stuff down in the time required to break it down. If the compost facility wants to sell their compost to farms that grow organic food, they legally cannot take bioplastics in their compost because it is considered an inorganic material. And the only way that will change is if it changes at the state level. And that's something that the U.S. Composting Council has been working on. But again, it's not going to change anytime soon. And on top of it, it's like, well, I saw the turtle with the thing in its nose, and I don't want this material these plastics to get out into the ocean. If a bioplastic gets out into the ocean, it will not break down. It needs heat to break down. It will act just the same exact way that a plastic will act. And one of the things I wanted to throw back to, I wanted to hear from Alessandro on, and maybe Lisa, this is for later, but I'll just put it out there, is we just keep having this conversation about what we as consumers can do. And I have some suggestions of what you can do, go to EWG, look up the term greenwashing, look up the greenwashing terminology that's out there. But what can we do as consumers in order to help with this problem? Why is it always the consumer's fault? Why are we not pushing for business responsibility? Because until we start pushing for business responsibility, we are not going to move this needle. And we must also understand that zero waste choices to reduce waste, to use reusables, to recycle whatever it is, it's not always equitable. So even the mere fact of saying everyone needs to use a reusable water bottle, we do not all have access to clean water. Individuals living in Wilmington do not have access to clean water. So the choices that we have are also not equitable. So I wanted to put that out there. Would love to hear from, this is Alessandro's area of expertise, and really would love to hear from him on that if he wants to talk about that.
I definitely don't want to monopolize the time, but I do appreciate everything that you just laid out, because this leads us into the larger issues of, again, environmental justice communities, which Wilmington is one of them. And so when we talk about a lot of these abilities, it's also thinking about the culture that we're creating and cultivating. We are not all at the forefront of these issues, and especially when you think about environmentalism, when a lot of communities of color, we're faced with a lot of these other issues, police injustice, undocumented issues, food apartheid. And so environmentalism and like thinking about our tangible solutions around air, water, and land, is probably on the lowest ring because we're just trying to survive. But thinking about plastics, everything you just laid out, sorry, what was your name? I'm trying to find your name on this thing. You are so right. You're hitting the nail on the head, because that's what we try and do. We're trying to build the capacity of community members to understand the life cycle of plastics. But within that is also understanding that we are in these communities, we are at the forefront of this, and we can change this. But it comes at a price of understanding, like, how are we educating each other? Right now, where I feel, we're all talking to the pew. How are we reaching outside the church? When a lot of our siblings are out here, we don't have access to clean water. We don't have access to, great air. But the reality is right now, this conversation is about waste. And so thinking about, waste, I don't know who in this particular table is indigenous, if there is any indigenous folks, but as stewards of the land, we as cultured, we have these practices instilled in us, but we have to acknowledge that we're also not providing these businesses an ability to succeed if they're not providing these opportunities of mitigating their impacts on waste. So those are some of the things, at least here in Boyle Heights, we had this campaign in 2019, maybe, where we called it No Straw November. And that was a small impact because, we are a predominantly new immigrant community of Latinos. And so we were trying to educate a lot of folks around like the impacts of the straw and using, a lot of the graphics around the turtles and things like that. And that helped. But a lot of the businesses are like, well, these are the alternatives we have. This is what we're going with, and we understood that. But how are we allowing and creating these opportunities for these businesses to thrive so that they can also be a part of the conversation and the movement towards zero waste?
Okay, thank you. All right, we want to try to wrap up by 7:30, and I knew I had a very ambitious list of stuff to talk about. I think and I know we haven't gotten to all the people who have raised their hands or who have put comments in the chat. I think what I'm feeling right now is that there's this bigger picture of this culture shift and this, some legislation that I want us to talk about, and getting the producers of the materials to be forced to or to accept responsibility for a part of the problem and not putting all the onus on the consumer. I still feel, and maybe this is once again the Catholic upbringing, but I still feel like I'm a consumer today. We don't have all the laws or policies in place that we need. There are still things that I feel like I still do feel compelled to buy this for my cat. I am still feeling like that I would like some immediate solutions, but maybe the point is there aren't any. Maybe I just have to reconcile that. And maybe the answer is I am not when I think I'm recycling and I'm wish cycling or think I'm buying the right products, I'm just doing that to make myself feel better. And maybe the answer I'm hearing from you guys is that the answer is not there. And we really just have to push for this extended producer responsibility. I'd love to hear you guys talk about that and talk about some of the legislation as Alessandro started tapping into some of the things we're looking at the state level, the federal level, and the local level about how we can change what we're doing.
And I think that one thing that we haven't touched on, and it was brought up, the organics portion of it, right? The 20 to 30% organics. If you look at our stream of recycling materials, plastics is a far smaller. It's 8 to 10% of 900 tons a day. And when you're talking about organics at 20 to 30% of 3,600 tons that go into the landfill, you're talking about, 8% of 900 is 72 tons, where you're talking about 30% of 3,600, which is 1,000 tons of organics. If you're making an impact on the environment, your organics is going to be your bigger solution. And as it was addressed earlier, California is pushing. You got, SB 1826, you got SB 1383. These legislations are pushing for organics reductions. The mayor of LA has the new Green Deal, which is, pushing to reduce the emissions, but the facilities are not there. There's not the compost facilities that need to be there. And when we talk about plastics and biodegradable plastics, we test everything we can get our hands on because we want to endorse, as City of LA, we want to endorse a product that has the ability to compost and haven't found it yet. We put it in a heated compost pile in a windrow for 180 days and it comes out looking like a fork. And that's just not compostable, right? Even though it says on the box, compostable, right? And if you think about it, if it was truly compostable, it wouldn't last that long on the shelf, right? So I think these bioplastics are kind of a slippery slope. I mean, you're creating it off of a vegetable oil rather than a mined oil maybe, but the end game in order to make it rigid, you have to do a lot to it and it's never going to break down. So I think the bigger discussion on organics will probably have a bigger and a quicker impact on the greenhouse gas emissions and a lot of the things that are going on today.
Thank you, Robert. Let me follow up with another question for you, which is one other thing I wanted to get to. Can you explain the connection between organics and our landfill and the climate crisis and emissions?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so organics, which is basically your food waste, your leftovers and everything else that goes in the ground. A landfill, and today's landfill is not yesterday's landfill. Yesterday's landfill, organics going in there was going to be a major, major hazard, right? It would go in, it would break down. The organics would, as it broke down, would release methane gas and and carbon dioxide and those kind of things, which are harmful to the environment, and it would just seep out of the ground and go into the air. So organics going in, the process of decomposition creates the greenhouse gas. Today's modern landfill, like the ones that we utilize, the city of LA, there's two of them, El Sobrante and Sunshine Canyon, are highly technical now. So they have gas extraction systems and wells and all that to reduce the impacts. But nothing's perfect, right? You can't capture every drop of everything, right? So the more you reduce the organics going into the landfill, the lower the decomposition, the less gas that could be converted, the better the gas capture system is. So you end up having hopefully a zero net at the end. But I think that's going to be a bigger challenge, and we're looking at ways to do that now. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have about, I know we're not getting to everybody. I apologize. We'll have to bring everybody back and continue the conversation because there's so much here. Can you folks chime in about a little bit more on the public policy piece, next steps, and getting producers to take responsibility for some of this?
I can speak to Reusable LA, Lisa, as you know, we are part of that, you and I. So Reusable LA is a coalition, and someone had said, why have we not banned foam in Los Angeles? Because of lobbyists. That's the major reason why. It's very hard. I just got big, really? Yeah. There are many organizations behind the scenes trying to do it. There's been a lot of work in that area. Right now, there is a push from the Coalition of Reusable LA that is trying to, on a policy called Skip the Stuff. That's just one little scratch in a whole series of desires that want to be passed by that coalition, by those organizations. And that is currently in the, I wrote my notes so I wouldn't ramble on this. That's in the EECJR. It is going back to the city attorney and small business council for the next 30 days for a report back on feasibility and definition of language. And what it says is that restaurants and those businesses like Grubhub are not allowed to just give away forks and knives and napkins and all the single-use stuff without the customer saying that they would like it. Then once it passes the EECJR, it will go to council and then hopefully go to the mayor to be signed off on. There's more information in regards to that at reusablela.com or .org, one of the two, I can't remember.
.org, I think.
.org, and hopefully they have .com too, because you just both of them at the same. But so that's happening. Just want to also point out, you know, we have a really, and someone had said we need a conversation in regards to reusables. I think you do. I think you need the public health department on here. I think you need people from Reusable LA to tell you what the feasibility of reusables are and what is happening up and down the state. And the fact that it is not illegal to use reusables. So if you walk into a coffee shop right now and bring your cup and they say, no, I can't do it, it's illegal, public health department says I can't do it, that is completely not true. They are legally allowed to take that cup if they would like to and how they handle it. It is the public health department that gets to make that decision. It's not a statewide decision. It is the local public health departments that are going to make that decision. And the LA County Public Health Department has not put any restrictions on the use of reusables during COVID.
And Jessica, I'm the one who brought up that comment, and I am regularly told by company, grocery stores and cafes that it's illegal per public health rules. And it's really hard to find clarity on that. So it seems like there needs to be some serious education.
It is. And the LA County Public Health Department's not making it any easier.
You know, and this is something, and we got to wrap up and move on, but I'll just say as quickly as I can, this is something that I personally was getting very passionate about and wanting to campaign on. And then we had the pandemic, and it's been a very tough environment to promote that message, but I think we're coming out of it and the timing is better. So yes, more to be continued. I want to really, really thank Robert and Jessica and Eric and Alessandro, and we'll have to have a part 2 to keep the conversation going because we had so many people wanting to engage and not enough time. So thank you. we are doing something we normally don't do. We are switching gears right now, and I'm going to mostly hand it over to Scott in a minute. Everybody is welcome to stay, but you might not want to stay if you are not interested in how we vote as the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. But we have a new proposal for you, and we want to make sure that you folks understand what we're talking about and get your thoughts about it, and make sure you can get the word back to your neighborhood councils. And we're going to be still on the theme of plastics, because we're going to have a trial practice vote tonight, and it's going to be on the Stand LA letter. You might wonder what Stand LA has to do with waste. Well, Stand LA stands for Stand Together Against Neighborhood Drilling, and that is working to eliminate the oil drilling sites in our neighborhoods. And oil is how plastic is derived. So it's all connected. And it goes back to what we were talking about with Alessandro, and that these things are happening in people's neighborhoods. This is where the stuff starts. Like, you know, we don't think about it when we buy it in the grocery store, but it came from somewhere. It came from somewhere where people live and where there are public health impacts. So it's all connected. Feel free to stay with us. If you're not staying with us, please complete an evaluation before you leave. And we will have a next meeting will be April 11th. I should have told you earlier that we were renaming you because we've renamed you. So I hope that didn't feel too discombobulating. We're doing this for our practice vote, and Muriel and Lorraine on our board have been helping with that. I think, Scott, I'm ready to hand it over to you. Does that work for you?
That sounds great.
All right, thank you.
So I'm going to invite my fellow steering board members to just interrupt and chime in at any point, because this has been a team effort to kind of think about how, I think any organization has to continue to think about, how it functions and how to improve that functioning. And so that's kind of what we've been doing as a steering board over the last few months, is thinking like, how are we moving forward and making sure that we're as impactful as we can be, that we engage as many voices as we can, that we're as transparent and accountable to our stakeholders as we possibly can. And so we've been talking about how the NCSA has functioned and how it might be improved. The big, and I'll say at the start, this is kind of definitely very much a work in progress. Tonight we're going to be talking about sort of one piece, which is how does the NCSA come to a position on policy and disseminate it? But I think moving forward, we'll be talking about other pieces of our governance. How are committees formed? How is the steering board appointed? How, and how do all those pieces work? But, in our conversations over the last few months, we came to the conclusion that we wanted to expand the decision-making process, and we felt that, we weren't necessarily being quite as impactful as we could. So we came to the conclusion that we think we need to move in a direction where this group makes the decisions on what the policy is for NCSA. So, in the past, typically a committee has sort of taken the lead, and the steering board has reviewed it, okayed it, and then a letter has come from an individual committee. We think that the NCSA really needs to have one voice to really have an impact on policymakers. And we think that policymakers rely, policymakers are by nature, very accountable to the public. They don't want to make a mistake. They want to continue to get elected. They need a certain amount of certainty, right? They need a certain amount of confidence that when they stick their neck out, they're going to be backed. And so we feel like it's important that NCSA have one voice, that it not moving forward be the advocacy committee of the NCSA or the sustainability committee, or I'm sorry, the transportation committee of the NCSA, but that it be the NCSA. and you are the NCSA. So that's why we're bringing this process to you. The notion is that an idea would come from the steering board or would come from one of our committees. And then at this monthly general membership meeting that we've started to do over the last few months, the actual decision making would be taken on. So the voters in this situation would be the area reps, committee chairs, and steering board members. Currently, we only have the most number of area reps we have from any of our member neighborhood councils is 3. So we're capping. We want all of those people obviously to have a say in the decision. So we discussed the idea of capping the number of area reps at 3, and that everyone in one of those 3 categories, either an area rep, a committee chair who's not an area rep, or a steering board member would have 1 vote. 1 person, 1 vote. And after we and it would work very much like a lot of you come from the neighborhood council system. It would work very much like that, right? Most neighborhood councils have committees that are sort of the idea generators that bring substantive motions to a general board, which is the decision maker, right? That is the notion. We want to have a little bit more of a formal process, at least for this portion of the monthly meeting, where a committee chair or steering board member would introduce this idea, the motion would be seconded, and then we would take input from folks that are not voting members, the sort of public comment, if you will, and then a discussion among members, and then we'll come to a vote. Maybe there'll be an amendment that would change the substance, and then we would come to a vote, and then that would be sent via letter to the decision makers after you, the members of the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, put your stamp on it. So I think we wanted to kind of give that big picture, and I'll invite my steering board fellow members to add anything at this point if you think I'm missing anything. But moving forward, Lorraine, were you about to say something?
Oh, go ahead. Yes, I'm going to say something when you're ready.
Okay. We want to kind of get your feedback on this general idea. So we'll, after Lorraine and other steering board members say whatever they want to say, we'll do some breakout groups to generate ideas, and then we'll kind of do a practice, which, if it works well, will maybe be the first position that the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance takes with this new governance system. So Lorraine?
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit, Muriel and I have been registering people in or checking your names against our list of designated reps from each neighborhood council that has joined the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance officially. And so if you have VM by your name, that means that we believe that you have been designated by your neighborhood council to be the rep to the NCSA. And so therefore you are a voting member and can participate in votes that determine what positions we'll be taking. If you have NV next to your name, that means we believe that you are not on our list of designated reps as a person designated to represent your neighborhood council and the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. Please let us know if you believe we have you down incorrectly. We want to make sure that we iron out any mistakes that we've made or anything that might be outdated in a list as well. If there are neighborhood councils that have recently changed their designated reps, we need to know about that. So in the process of this vote, if you have VM by your name, you'll be a voting member. And if you don't, you will not be a voting member. And again, just want to reiterate what Scott said about each neighborhood council is allowed to designate up to 3 reps. And so you might want to bring that information as well back to your neighborhood councils to make sure that they know about that and designate however many reps they want to designate.
Thank you, Lorraine. Ernie, do you have anything to add? Or any of our other?
Yeah, no, I think, Scott, you did a good job. And Lorraine, thank you for explaining that as well. I think Lisa also in the emails that sent out did a great job providing some context to this by explaining that in the history of the NCSA, we've only taken 2 positions in now almost 7 years of existence, I believe. And so we want to be able to take more positions, more quickly, more strongly, with one voice, as Scott pointed out. Those 2 positions, if you're curious, were supporting the 2,500-foot setback on oil drilling sites. That's part of the Stand LA effort that Lisa mentioned. And then the other position was in support of transitioning our Department of Water and Power towards 100% clean and renewable energy by 2030, if possible. And that's it. Those are very good positions, but we want to be able to do more, and we want to be able to engage all of our neighborhood councils and partners in doing so.
Yeah, and I will add, in addition to, I think we want to do this for a number of reasons. One is we think it's more democratic. There's going to be more voices involved. And we think it's going to be more effective, more impactful. Like the position will really mean something more because it's coming from the organization. We also see it as a tool for engagement. So we think that, as we move in this direction in terms of our governance, all of a sudden this monthly meeting actually becomes really important. It becomes really high stakes. And maybe some of these issues, the conclusion on what the policy of the NCSA is not foregone. And so we think that's a good thing because, the area reps are going to want to be at these meetings. They're going to want to have their representation. Maybe a neighborhood council will disagree with the position that we take on. And that's not a bad thing either, because maybe they get more engaged, or they appoint a second rep or a third rep, or it creates a conversation at the individual neighborhood council level. So in a lot of ways, we think that this is going to have kind of a ripple effect in terms of engagement. So that's something that we're excited about. Cord?
Thank you. Sorry, area rep, you mentioned there are only 3, but yet you want, I'm sorry, what is that role? What is an area rep?
Right. The area rep are the appointees by the neighborhood council. So the neighborhood councils take a vote to appoint representatives to the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. There's no neighborhood council that's currently a member that has more than 3 reps. So that's why we set the cap. We kind of want to make sure that it's like that we have a 1 person, 1 vote system. We came to a conclusion, at least a majority of our board members felt that was important, that we didn't want it, at least many of us when we discussed this on the steering board didn't think it was a great idea to have neighborhood councils take the vote rather than individuals in this body, because then some people would have a third of a vote, some people would have a half a vote. We think like in this space, it's important that everybody has equal voting power, but we wanted to cap, we didn't want it to sort of reduce any gamesmanship with, neighborhood councils potentially, trying to increase their voting power too much. So we capped it at 3. Does that make sense, Cord?
And just to help, I think that term, that's not a term that we've typically used, area rep. We tend to call you folks neighborhood council member representatives.
Yeah, I guess I got confused with the term area.
Yeah.
Is that like we have regions, we have all these super region things. So I didn't know if area was a new geographic distribution.
Got it.
That was more my concern.
And I'm just going to say this out loud because it's too hard to text, because this is a trial, as we've done. We have, okay, I think it's being changed, but we've had some folks who were listed as voting members who are not. So if you notice that you're being demoted, my apologies. This is why it's a practice run. So anyway, there you go.
Mark?
I just wanted to say this is such a great idea, because other alliances that I've been with in the neighborhood councils, this is a tremendous idea. I think this is really productive. And will it be, it's kind of in the Robert's Rules of Order model as far as the voting itself?
Yeah, I think we're going to use something close to Robert's Rules tonight, just because that's what I'm used to as having run Mid-City West. and I'll kind of facilitate tonight, but we haven't come to any conclusion or any amended our bylaws to adopt any particular parliamentary procedure yet. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of follow-up conversation about these details.
And then if I can add very quickly, and I'm sorry if this was already covered, I just want to make sure that we do cover it in case we didn't. If you're not a voting member, we still want you to be engaged. This is something that we discussed as a board, but we wanted to put definition to us being a neighborhood council sustainability alliance and what that looks like. And so if you're not a voting member because you're not an appointed liaison for your neighborhood council, then number one is I would encourage you to become one if you can. Go to your neighborhood council and have that discussion and see if there's a way that might be possible. But also, even if that's not possible, we have committees, and anyone who has an interest in sustainability in Los Angeles can participate in these committees. And committees will be passing along recommendations to the board and to this body on positions that we take. So there's still an avenue, not just to vote, but to influence the decisions and the positions that we take here.
That's a great point. Thank you, Ernie, for making that. Many of you have been so engaged with us in different ways. And it hasn't really mattered up until this point whether or not you were a representative. I think now it's going to matter. So there you go.
So I think Philip has his hand up.
And Mary Louise, I see.
Who goes first?
Philip.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say the job of representative is to represent the views of, the people they're representing. And so until now, my understanding has been that, I'm representing the NCASA's views to my neighborhood council and my neighborhood council's views to the NCSA. We haven't had, voting formally, but I still took it as, as a liaison role. Now, if there is voting, that's more important. But I think it's important to have time for the neighborhood council to consider whatever we'll be representing them on, the topics that we're going to decide. So that's something I think is very important for acceptance of this. In order for the neighborhood councils to feel they still want to have this system. And also the second thing is that if we have multiple representatives who are supposed to be representing the neighborhood council, it would make sense that they would hold the same position, and it seems discriminatory against people who don't people who are on the neighborhood council, on the board or whoever, who don't have the time to engage in the NCSA as well, right? That's why we have a representative who's supposed to do that job. If you have multiple people, then you need all these people to spend the time doing that, right? So I'm not sure if that's all right. I'm just wondering. I'm sure you consider that. So I'm wondering about the rationale for having, multiple. How that would be, democratic and representative, actually.
Right. So I'll take the second one first. I mean, that was mostly a response to, what is actually the facts on the ground, right? This process is really about expanding engagement and participation, and we didn't want to reduce engagement or participation in any way. And some of our member neighborhood councils have up to 3 reps. So, that was kind of a non-starter for us to say, like, okay, now we're going down to 2 reps. People that are already engaged with this work to not have them have a voice didn't make sense to us. So that was the main rationale behind that piece. I mean, I think that the first piece that you mentioned goes really to the heart of political theory and of representative democracy, right? We most of our democracies, modern democracy systems, are representative in nature, right? And we want, one of our values is that the people that we elect or appoint that they're working for us, working for the people, but they are also in almost any modern democracy system making decisions, right? And I think it's also important to understand that the neighborhood councils or the constituents or the voters that they're representing are not monolithic, right? They have different views themselves. So, I mean, we all know this, who have served on neighborhood councils, right? I often talk about this at Mid-City West. There's a lot of folks that sling around sort of like, you're going against the community. And I try to remind people, there's not one community. Let's not do that. Let's all believe that we are, working in good faith, and that, we have different points of view, and those different points of view are also reflected in the community. And so I think that was kind of the theory that we were going for, was that, that when a neighborhood council appoints its representatives, that they understand that those representatives will have to make decisions as voting members of this body. That, by the way, is the same way that pretty much all of the alliances work that exist right now in the neighborhood council system. My opinion is that, as I was mentioning earlier, is that those votes increase engagement. And if a neighborhood council is not pleased with Scott Epstein's vote or Philip Ganchev's vote, then okay, they try to deal with it. They apply pressure to Philip, or they next time, when a new board is elected, maybe they don't appoint Philip again if they feel that he doesn't represent their views. I think there's all kinds of the high stakes nature of this new system introduces all kinds of accountability mechanisms. So that's kind of my take on it, but I realize that there's there is that tension, as I think there is in any sort of representative democracy system. I hope that answers your question, Philip. Mary Louise.
Mary Louise, you're muted.
You're still muted. There you are.
Yes. I had Scott, have you gone to your neighborhood council and gotten their feeling about your power as a representative on this Sustainability Alliance? Have they made it clear that you can represent them and vote on things?
Well, I'm actually not an area rep. I'm on the steering board, but I haven't been appointed by my neighborhood council actually.
Well, I'm on the neighborhood council, and I'm not sure that they are comfortable with anybody taking a position on any issue without it having gone to the public through being on the agenda, so that the public who might be interested could come and comment, and the board probably would feel they had to vote on it. They would probably have to vote on whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday. They're so structured. They're so tight about things like that. I think that plan is an excellent plan. We've got to feel that we can make some decisions, or we're just wasting our time. That if we don't make any decisions, all we are reporters, information conduits from this body to our own neighborhood councils. But I don't know exactly how my particular neighborhood council would feel about it. They're very, very fussy in many instances. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
I hear you, Mary Louise. Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback. And I'm familiar with Pico and C to some degree. So that resonates with me to some degree based on what I've seen. And I think that all neighborhood councils have a variety of cultures, and so I think we're aware that this change, will have different reactions from folks, but we think that it's going to increase engagement and participation. So we feel like we're leaning in the right direction here. And I appreciate it sounds like you kind of lean that way too. So thank you.
Oh, I do. Yeah. But I think that I would have to sell that point of view And there will be people who will say it's not in it's not in our structure, and I don't see how you can justify it. But
Yeah.
that, that's just a reality. Also, if they want to vote on everything, if they don't want their representative to vote unless everybody in the within the neighborhood council area has a chance to express his or her opinion, then we really get slowed down. I could not come to you and say it's a done deal. They have to.
Yeah, those are very good points, Mary Louise. I do see Mark has had his hand up for a while. Elizabeth is on stack, Rosalind and Terry as well. But I wanted to comment very quickly on this. And Joanne put this into the chat. Thank you for doing that, Joanne. There are 2 other alliances out there that use a similar model where they allow people to vote on the honor system so they can make decisions. The LA Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, LANC, that's how they operate, as well as VANC, the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. So it's not totally new to the neighborhood council system or alliances to go down this road. And we actually took a lot of pride in the way we did it before, which was having the neighborhood councils vote as a neighborhood council before we had them weigh in. But that's as much pride as we took in that and as much credibility as that gave us, that also kept us from taking more positions. It meant that's in large part why we've only taken 2 positions in the last 7 years as an entire organization. And we get requests all the time to sign on to a letter with one of our partner organizations or other groups that are doing similar work. And the issue then becomes, well, is the committee going to sign on? Is the board going to sign on? And we don't have one voice and not everybody is on the same page. So we figured that this is the best way to do it. At least it gives us an opportunity once a month to consider things. And what LANC and VANC do is they leave it up to the individual neighborhood councils as well to decide whether their members can even vote or take a position, or if they're unable to because the neighborhood council doesn't want them to do that until they give them the right permission to do that. So just, wanted to put it out there. There are some other models out there and add a little more context to this. Mark, I know you've had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if that can be, when the appointment is made, if it could just be, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I also wanted to ask, is there a committee formed planning the rollout of this, or is this like an airplane being built in mid-flight right now, or because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this is really wonderful what you're doing. Is there a committee to roll it out?
It's 8 o'clock.
Well, basically this has been driven by the steering board. This has been like the heart of our conversations over the last 4 or 5 months. I would say for as long as I've been on the board, which is since September. And as I said, definitely a work in progress. There's a lot more details to be ironed out, but we've been kind of taking the lead on it. But we want your input too. That's why we're having this conversation.
And just one last thing for me, and I promise to not raise my hand again. But are we going to have any kind of ability to, as the alliance, to comment on files on
council files?
On council files.
To do community impact statements?
Yes.
Yes, I think we will. We are an official neighborhood council alliance. So that's exactly one of the reasons why we want to move to this, because we'd like to be more agile to be able to do exactly that, so that we can have a say in council files moving forward.
But the neighborhood council could still, the individual neighborhood council could still do a CIS.
Absolutely.
Can we use hands or stack?
Yeah. I see. Okay, I'll try to follow the stack order here. I see Elizabeth, Rosalind, Terry are on stack, and then also Melanie Winters is on stack in the chat. So Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to bring up, I think one of the things to consider is that several NCs, including mine, have specific bylaws stating that unless there needs to be a vote whenever somebody votes on something, and we've gotten around that by designating being able to represent the NC, and that's the biggest thing, is like asking somebody to represent the NC, and having that be part of like their liaison position. But in order to do that, the people who are in the liaison position will have to be re-voted in with that specified. And so I think doing a vote tonight is could be problematic, because I know, for example, like our representative is Adrian. I'm not sure if she's here tonight, but if she is, she's also our president, but she wouldn't technically be able to vote to represent our NC because that was not part of her designation when she became a liaison to the NCSA. And
Yeah,
I think I feel like there's a lot of other neighborhood councils that have similar things.
I want to chime in. Elizabeth, tonight is a practice vote. It is not necessarily a real vote. So point taken. We don't want to jump the gun. We do want to make sure neighborhood councils have a heads up and an opportunity to react accordingly.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. So next up, I think, is Rosalind in the queue.
Thanks. Yeah, I love the direction that this is going. And I think one thing that might be helpful is to provide some sample language that's written out that everybody can take back to their neighborhood councils, to help the neighborhood councils understand what is happening, what the parameters are. I think it's really great to bring up the information that other councils, or that there are other systems that use this system. Sorry, what you were talking about, Ernie. And I think it's also good to just make clear the types of things that we would be voting on, and also to just reiterate how that's different from a neighborhood council doing a CIS is doing it on behalf of the neighborhood council. Us doing it, voting into the NCSA is different. And maybe to just kind of clarify that and make it easier for us to explain it would be really helpful.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you so much. Terry.
That was a good point, and I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. And I guess I would want to clarify. So when we would take a position and say, yes, I, as an NCSA rep, support this motion, supporting a council file, but isn't it mean further that I am then saying, because I'm with Tarzana Neighborhood Council, that Tarzana Neighborhood Council supports it as well? Because going further down the road, I would have to probably get a vote on my neighborhood council to allow me to have a position to represent them. I mean, I could represent myself within the NCSA community, but for me to take a stand without running it by my board saying that they support it, that is not their understanding of my position currently. There would have to be a vote, there'd have to be maybe a motion or something, if that is what we're saying. If we're saying that my voting represents Tarzana Neighborhood Council without their approval, versus me saying, yes, as an NCSA, I support NCSA taking this position, that's something different.
Yeah, I mean, I think our concept is that it's an independent body, but appointed by and therefore accountable to the individual neighborhood councils, right? And these are this type of governance body is not, is very much in the world. I mean, like you look at LA County, for example, the Southern California Association of Governments, which is the regional planning body for Los Angeles County, has all kinds of representatives from different cities, municipalities, county, all sorts of things, right? Culver City sends Mayor Alex Fish to SCAG. I don't believe that Mayor Fish has to get a vote from his 5 council members every time he takes a position at SCAG. But if he does something that's way out of line from what the council in Culver City likes, or what the populace in Culver City likes, he's probably going to be in kind of some trouble, right? When he wants to run for re-election again. So as I was saying, like, we think that there's like lots of accountability built in such a system, but we're concerned that, getting the express permission from every neighborhood council before we take any action kind of nullifies the effectiveness of this as an organization. So that's kind of our concept behind it. Karen Knapp from Atwater. Karen Knapp?
Hello, I'm Karen Knapp from Atwater Village Neighborhood Council. And hi, Ernie. I don't know if I missed it, but I haven't heard Dunn mentioned. Don't they have some thoughts on this? Because I was a member of the Alliance of River Communities, and we were told that we couldn't, do a CIS or, make a comment. Our purpose was to bring an issue back to the neighborhood council and put it through committee and then vote on it as a neighborhood council, and then we could go on our way. And I'm not quite sure why that doesn't work. Are you saying that it just takes too long to go through that process?
Yeah, we think that there is, there's a culture and passions right here in this room that's connected to other neighborhood councils, but also has a spirit of its own and it is already doing good work in Los Angeles. And we hope to magnify that. And we think that, by the way, the relationships that we have with the neighborhood councils is what makes us even more impactful. We're excited about the notion of, well, okay, we take a position as the NCSA, then all of our area reps are so excited, they go back to their neighborhood councils, and instead of saying, oh, do you think we could support this? They say, I was at this meeting, it was this super exciting idea. I voted for it because I thought it was, reflected our values. I think we should vote for it now and magnify our voices. That we think that that's kind of the culture that's going to really drive change in the city. So
yeah.
Okay, but is this allowed by Dunn? That's one issue I just want to mention or ask.
I'd like to answer that briefly. I don't think Dunn has any say in it. We are an alliance. We are not beholden to or accountable to Dunn. I will say, go ahead.
No, I'm just surprised. I didn't know that.
That's okay. Yeah. I mean, we have a relationship with them. They support us. We're mentioned on their website. I have an email address of theirs, but that's really the extent. They assign a liaison to us, but that's really the extent of the relationship. I will say that Bonk, I'm going to say it was maybe a couple years ago, raised a related issue and did express some concern about some of the alliances taking positions, and Bonk asked the question, who are they really representing? Several representatives of alliances attended a Bonk meeting and expressed some chagrin and concern because it is, even though we weren't working that way at the time, it bothered me because my position and the other alliance's position was, we're alliances. We aren't beholden to Bonk in the way that neighborhood councils are. And I did not hear that issue raised ever again. They were going to take the question to the city attorney, and that's the last thing I heard, just so you know.
But Karen's specific question was about CISs, and I think she might be right that then alliances cannot submit CISs, and that is not the main purpose of this. Scott mentioned that we might be able to, but I think that might not be accurate. So we need to check on that.
Yeah.
I actually think it is. I don't know this for a fact, and we actually don't have a liaison right now, which is why I don't know the answer. But Dan Cagle, who I don't think is with us tonight, is our Energy Committee chair, and he actually sent me something that showed that alliances do have the possibility of submitting CISs. So we need to verify that, but it does look like we could.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a technical, thank you for clarifying that, Lorraine. I think that's a technical question that we have to explore because, essentially a CIS is a special privilege, right? Like for neighborhood councils, that they get a special place in the council file. I think even if we can't do a CIS, we can still send letters to decision makers, even attach things to council files, because external advocacy organizations can send letters in and have them attached to council files. So so that is an important detail, but I think either way, we're excited about like having a strong voice for this body.
Yeah, and to your point, Karen, the idea here, part of what we're doing here also is introducing these monthly meetings. This is our third monthly meeting. Before, we used to meet like once a quarter, and it would be more of a forum. We want to conduct a little bit more business to impact policy in the city and sustainability efforts in the city. So the idea would be that in a monthly meeting, we can discuss taking a position, maybe on a CIS. Folks that care about sustainability in the city would be able to vote on it if you're a designated rep for your NCSA. And then the majority of those votes would be able to formally recommend back to the neighborhood councils that are members of the NCSA to also take that position on a CIS, as an example. And we would like to be able to do that with a quick turnaround, right? Within 30 days, which is hard, but that's the idea of having monthly meetings and then getting those positions rolled out immediately to our member neighborhood councils so that they can agendize it and take a vote on it as soon as possible as well. That's a lot faster than the way we were operating in the past. So that's part of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay,
Melanie Winter?
sounds good to me.
Okay. Two things. It's been a while. So I want to go backwards for a second before I come back to this, and that's on the issue of 3 reps. I don't understand. 3 reps is, 3 people can participate in NCSA, but if we're taking a vote, can't those 2 or 3 or 1 rep from each neighborhood council come to a consensus position and submit 1 vote on behalf of their neighborhood council? I didn't quite understand the reasoning for having variable numbers of representatives from neighborhood councils. I kind of heard increased engagement, but it seemed more confusing. So that was one. And then the other was it would seem to be pretty simple. And if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you become a representative to the NCSA from your neighborhood council, it's been a while, a form, there's some sort of thing that goes to the neighborhood council, and they say that you are representing Studio City at the NCSA. If the NCSA has something on the website and in their guiding documents that says we take votes, we vote together to take positions on issues, and that represents the totality of the NCSA membership's position on issues. And we're speaking for the NCSA, not for individual neighborhood councils. That seems a lot simpler than having everybody have to go back to their neighborhood council and bring this up as an issue and raise all kinds of confusion. And I may be missing really big points here, but those are just the one question I had and the comment on it, and then my thinking on the other questions that have been raised. Check.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, I mean, so we actually had a very robust conversation around the voting rules at our steering board. So, and I think that there's interesting arguments on both sides. I think from my point of view, the notion of each individual member of this body voting rather than neighborhood councils being optimal was there. From my point of view, there's two important things there that make me think that's the right choice. One is we're a big body. There's a lot of neighborhood councils involved, a lot of voices, and so logistically, when we're trying to take a vote on a matter, the notion of neighborhood councils caucusing in the middle of a vote is something that makes getting the work done challenging. From the other thing, from my point of view, is that I'm a big believer in sort of one person, one vote election systems. And for anybody that's really engaging in this space, I want them to feel like they have an equal voice. And so I wouldn't want anyone to feel like, okay, I'm from a council that has 3 reps, so I only get a third of a vote. as opposed to other folks that have a full vote. That just doesn't feel like it's conducive to me. It doesn't feel like conducive to a positive culture in this body. But I can understand the notion that we are accountable to neighborhood councils and that there should be some equality across neighborhood councils in the voting. That's just not where I landed. But we did have a robust, where I personally landed, but we did have a robust conversation on that. I want to be mindful of time, Lisa. Are we a hard out at 8:30? Or what's?
Yes, I think we are. So thank you for raising that question. I'm actually thinking, I think we should do our committee updates, but I think we should not do the practice vote. That's my recommendation. I think this is a really important conversation, and I think we should just continue the conversation, not do the breakout groups, and kind of come up with a plan for next steps. That's my suggestion.
Okay, so maybe we'll run down the queue and then we'll try to wrap things up. Cord?
Yeah, I'll just, I can appreciate that maybe some neighborhood councils had 2 or 3 representatives, but I really think one voting member seems just to make the most sense. Otherwise, sorry, fly. And the other thought was just, this is why my neighborhood council won't recognize me or won't advocate. So they have supported my membership in the NCSA, but they will not allow me to represent them because they're like, literally, I think several members said, like, are they going to make us endorse all sorts of crazy tree hugging activities? And so I tried to disavow them of that, but unsuccessfully so far. But I'm new. So as I build trust in the neighborhood council, back to why would they allow me to vote? Eventually, a year or 2 from now, hopefully they will allow me to represent them as a voting member. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can just respond also, I mean, I think there will be some neighborhood councils who say, no, we don't want you to vote on anything unless our council has taken a position on it. And so if you are a representative from one of those neighborhood councils that's just unwilling to allow you to take a vote on any positions that the neighborhood council has not taken a position on, then you're just going to have to, not vote on things that your neighborhood council hasn't taken a position on, and tell them, make it clear to them that that means their neighborhood council is not being represented. If that's the way they want it, then that's the way they want it.
And that is the way that Lank, as an example, the LA Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, that's how they operate. They really put the onus back on the neighborhood council and the representative that neighborhood council sends to the alliance meetings to know whether or not they're permitted to vote. So each one of them can move forward as they deem appropriate. And we're taking all of this input. We'll discuss it further, but there is precedent for what we're describing.
Yeah, I wonder whether if they're called appointees rather than representatives, whether that would assuage any concerns. Just an idea. I think Elizabeth and Melanie already participated. So do we want to talk about next steps, Lisa? You're on mute.
I think Melanie asked a question that we didn't answer.
Oh.
I think she said, if I heard it correctly, why do we have to go back to our neighborhood councils? I think, Melanie, you were just saying, make a change in the bylaws and it's done, and why do we need to go back to our neighborhood councils? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, my understanding was that folks here, for instance, are appointed or allowed, depending on how your neighborhood council sees it, to represent the neighborhood council at the NCSA. And NCSA has taken positions on things before. It's usually been voted on by just the board. So I don't see this as a radical change.
We actually haven't. We have only taken a position twice, and that was with all the member neighborhood councils' input. And the board outside of that has taken a position maybe once, and that was frankly the only time I'm aware of that I can recall was because of the pandemic when neighborhood councils weren't functioning.
Right. I didn't say they were doing it all the time. I just said it has happened before, and I don't recall an uproar So it
Yeah.
didn't seem that this doesn't seem that radical a departure to
Right.
me.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to, yeah, let me, I
The thing is
reread the,
that the NCSA, it would be a position of the NCSA, not a position of all the neighborhood councils.
right. I think that's a great distinction that Rosalind really highlighted, and I think Terry really appreciated, and I appreciate it too. And I think any communication really needs to be about that. I did reread the bylaws a couple days ago, and the departure is not as radical as you might think. It is a departure, but we do in our current bylaws allow for, under certain circumstances, us taking positions without conferring with neighborhood councils.
Yeah, and those are usually done by either the board, and we say the board took that position, or by a committee. And so we say, the trees committee took a position. And so we're actually trying to improve upon that and speak with one voice, as opposed to, the board said this, the committee said that. We haven't had controversy yet. We don't want to have any controversy. We want to improve. And we think the timing is really good right now because of the election cycle. Neighborhood council elections have begun this month and will be taking place for the next few months. So it's the perfect time to have this discussion, if we're going to make any changes, to roll out these changes and then go back and re-engage these newly elected bodies, newly elected boards of neighborhood council members, and ask them to appoint who the reps are going to be and provide the proper understanding and expectations of how we're going to operate going forward. So that's also why we're doing this now.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to talk about next steps, and then I'm going to put the link to the evaluation in the chat again, and then we'll do committee updates and announcements and close out if we can. Scott, do you have thoughts on next steps?
Well, I was thinking, I think we had a really great conversation tonight. Maybe the reps could, have some discussions if they wish with some of their colleagues in the neighborhood councils, and kind of we could have like a report back session at the next meeting. And then I think we should do the practice vote at the next meeting to kind of get our feet wet on this.
I like that. Yeah, that sounds good to me. I can't see anybody because I'm gonna, what do people think? Can you just show me like maybe thumbs up or thumbs down or other suggestions? Now's the time to chime in. Okay, looks like people are pretty good with it. Thank you guys. Okay, Scott, did you want any like final closing words, or anybody else want to say anything else? I hope this is, I don't know if that's the.
Mark, you have some parting words?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in closing, Jessica Aldridge, who spoke earlier, is actually a host on a radio show, Eco Justice Radio on KPFK, and did a great series on waste. And I put the link to the radio show in the chat, and it shows up at 8:07.
Okay, we're not quite at announcements yet, and I am wanting to make sure that I get you the right link, but that's fine. We're almost there. If I get you the wrong link to the evaluation, let me know, because it doesn't look right to me. So maybe somebody can test it and tell me if it works as a link. Oops, it went just to Raduca, who was probably telling me something. Okay, committee updates. I'm going to work on, Cora, do you want to say anything briefly about advocacy?
Absolutely, yeah. We met on the 7th, and Philip, I give full credit for taking great notes on our discussion. One note is we moved to, I think, Lisa, this is your recommendation, to a rotating facilitator and recording secretary in each meeting, giving people the experience of leading meetings, but also relieving the chair to focus on the content of the meeting. Council File 190603, the City Fire District expansion. Advocacy Committee opposed unless amended to use sustainable materials such as wood and avoid cement. Lisa to bring to board. LA River Master Plan. Original plans to wonderfully restore the river to a natural state have been abandoned. Various voices have sort of bowed out of engaging. And then Durban to engage Melanie Winter, who's here, I think, on how NCSA can help. and Lisa to look for city file. Public banking, this I know very little about, discussed but did not follow. I did not follow. Someone on the committee want to chime in? Please do. Foodware accessories, CF 210064, foodware accessories upon request. Committee supports this. Lisa to take to board. Climate emergency mobilization office. Pursue having Maria Seguera talk on or around Earth Day. And again, Lisa to pursue. And vehicle idling. Boy, I just, on a personal note, I ate outdoors today and there was a car sat idling for at least 20 minutes right next to us. And boy, was it annoying. Anyway, committee supports Terry Saucier, Wright, Philip Ganchev to pursue with various neighborhood council interests. That is our update.
Great, thank you. Energy, I don't think Dan is here.
Really quickly, I do see a hand up.
One for advocacy.
Yeah, I do see a hand up for Devon Williams. I'm just curious if it's related to the advocacy committee.
No, it was a question related way back. I just had a brief question about, as an area rep for a neighborhood council within the NCSA, do we debrief them about this current meeting that we're having now?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. That would be great. I'd really appreciate that. That's really the idea. Thank you. Okay, Philip, are you able to, I'm putting you on the spot. Could you say anything about the Energy Committee, please? You look like.
No, I'd have to refer to the notes. All
right.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can say I can't remember who was there. We're excited about pursuing building decarbonization. I don't think I've talked to the board about this yet, but we might be working to join a coalition of folks working on building decarbonization. So there's more to come on that. And the 100% renewable energy study is wrapping up this month. So we will come back to you very soon with more information about that. And we are still hoping to get our carbon cost motion introduced, hoping that Councilmember Koretz will do that. We'll see. And we're working on a public, on more videos, more social media campaign to share the fun stuff ways people can reduce their energy consumption. Transportation, Muriel, I think you can say something about that, right?
Yeah, so we met up on March 4th with Nancy, Kira, me, Philip, Lisa, and Ernie came by too. So we did a little brief like LA Transit, like 2-minute visual tour. And then we talked about TDMs, the Transit Demand Management Ordinance. So that's gonna be like, that's gonna be in the woodwork in the future, but it's just basically trying, I'm sorry, did someone say something?
It's okay.
Oh, okay, sorry. So it's going to be updated. It's going to be updated soon, and it's supposed to it's like it's a way to gather information so that you could like kind of inform like how public transportation is planned in the city. And yeah, that's like the so yeah, that's going to be coming up in the future. And then there's also, we also did some event brainstorming. So a way that we could we could expand public transportation, and then also bike lanes. Bike lanes is also a big topic of discussion. And then also free fare transit. So there was also like talk about a potential free fare for Metro. So yeah, we talked about a lot.
Thank you, that was great. Joanne, you want to talk about trees, please?
Sure. The Trees Committee is meeting bi-monthly. We did a meeting in January, kind of unpacking the protected tree amendment and the protected tree ordinance, both of which are extremely problematic and more like, pay to take a tree out. We do have an upcoming meeting on March 27th, 1:30, that's a Saturday. And our guest speaker is Jamie T. Hall. He's a land use and environmental attorney, and he's going to present, here's his topic, What sort of environmental analysis is required for a protected tree removal? Understanding how CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, applies to single-family home development projects in Los Angeles with biological resource impacts. Now that's a mouthful, but the reason we're having this is because of the McMansionization of our hillside properties that are removing oak walnut woodlands. And it's actually having a hugely detrimental effect on our city. The walnut is endangered and it only occurs in Los Angeles, the black walnut. So we are trying to figure out how we can get the city to go back to doing MMDs and EIRs when someone wants to build in the hills, because right now they're losing valuable trees and building 3- and 4-story homes that don't seem to have any consideration of the environment. And we hear urban forestry saying that, you know, a 3,500 square foot home is a reasonable size. And, you know, it's just not really the kind of goal that we want. So we're trying to listen to Jamie, who's been through many hearings and always on the side of the trees. So that's our meeting. And if you want to attend, trees@ncsa.la or email Lisa and she'll forward it to me. And the Zoom link and the agenda will come out together in about a week. Thanks.
Thank you. And I want to say our next meeting will be April 11th, Sunday, 6:30 to 8:30. And Marta Segura, who Cord mentioned, she's the new director of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. And she will be speaking for part of the meeting. So I'm really excited about that because we'll get to hear from her about her vision for this office and how we can support her work. Also, our next electric vehicle workshop is Tuesday, the 23rd, co-sponsored by the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. Those are not my announcements. Does anybody else have announcements? Muriel, go for it.
So I don't know if anyone lives around Echo Park, but there was going to be a town hall meeting regarding a dedicated bus lane along Alvarado all the way to Sunset. I think it's like for the Dash line, but it's I don't know. It seems pretty important. So yeah, come out if you can. It's next Wednesday at 6 p.m. If you'd like, you could email me. If you don't, I'm sure I think some of you guys probably got forwarded that email, but just in case.
I didn't know about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I was there today, so I will, yeah.
It's a very good point. Thank you, Marielle. It's actually a bus lane, only certain hours of the day. So it would be between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. In the mornings and between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the evenings. And it's going to occupy a space where currently there's no parking anyways during that time. During that time frame, because they want to, let traffic go through Alvarado. It's a busy corridor, and it would be between Sunset and 7th Street. And this is a really good opportunity to get a positive outcome out of a dedicated bus lane, so that we can champion that in other areas of the city. We know that reduces global greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. I'm speaking to the choir here, so I don't think I have to give you guys all the merits, but if you're in the area, please stay tuned. Please champion that if you can.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you. Kira, did you want to make an announcement?
Did you guys talk about leaf blowers and I missed it?
Nope.
Okay, great. So both Studio City Neighborhood Council and Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council passed a motion. There's a loophole in the LA Municipal Code, and we're going to try to get advocacy going to get that loophole closed so that the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers can actually be enforced. And I believe the Resilient Palisades flyer was sent out if you get the NCSA newsletter. And I want to thank them very, very much for that information, because the current trade-in offer that's being given through AQMD is not even close to sufficient to helping the yard workers actually do their work. So I'm definitely going to be following up with Resilient Palisades and also AGSA to find out what better options are available. And then also Senator Stern, some of you were probably in that meeting. He was talking about some legislation that could be going statewide. So I'll be following up with him. And then if anyone besides me, has any interest in the Sepulveda Basin, which is currently kind of a mess, I also am going to try to be getting like a town hall forum with Melanie Winters and Senator Stern in regards to environmental aspects of the basin. So if anybody's interested in leaf blower stuff or bringing that to your neighborhood council, please, please, please definitely email me, because I hate them like flames on the sides of my face, for any of you that get that movie reference. But I think if we all work together, we could, and especially if someone like Senator Stern is getting involved, then maybe we could make a little bit of headway. Well, we can at least try. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Devon, I'm sorry, was your hand raised again? Did you want to make an announcement? I think that means no. Okay, any more announcements? Philip, go for it. Or are you just saying, okay, no, you are.
I just wanted to say that there was a discussion on email, which I think is important for everyone to engaging in, about Council District 4's new representative wanted to, ask what important big ticket sustainability issues she would champion at the city council. So look for that email in your mailbox and engage.
Well, I only sent that to advocacy. I think, yeah, I only sent that to some committee members. So not everybody got that. But if you want to get involved in that, email me. Okay.
Sorry, Lisa.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, guys. To be continued. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe and healthy.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I got to remember to save the chat.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, there I go.
Good night.
Hi, Lisa.
Night.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Miron.